And good evening, Risky, Alok, and many others introducing themselves in the chat box, already being very active. Thank you all for joining today's session. We're here to talk about sustainability, and particularly around sustainability clauses and how we can use checks and compacts to improve on sustainability of wash services that we're all working on. We're looking for practical experiences. We'll share some of our work that we're doing, but also looking forward in the group work to hear from others on what they've done. I think it is a really nice follow-up from a session that took place on Monday, organized by the Dutch Ministry together with FCDO, IRC and other SWA representatives, and UNICEF, talking about how we can improve on sustainability. And we're very happy to have Brechtje from the ministry with us today. We'll shortly hear more from her. My name is Esther de Vrede. I work for Simavi as Director of Programs, but today I'm here as your host, moderating this session. There's many different speakers and participants from a range of partner organizations that we work with, both in the Netherlands as well as many countries that we'll hear from today. There'll be a short introduction to the WASH SDG program and the consortium partners, so I'm not going into detail on that. Yeah, it's going to be a very reflective session, I hope. We're looking forward to also learn from you, not only to share. So before we go ahead, I'd like to introduce our Managing Director, Arya Brauer, to really kick off this meeting today. Arya, please come in.
Thank you, Esther. It's really good to see you all. Very welcome. And I think it's great that you all took the opportunity to join this session. It's going to be very inspiring because it's about sustainability. It's about system change. And in the end, it's all about sustainability, because if our work doesn't last, what's the point? But of course, it's also very interesting to understand how our WASH interventions are really leading to this system change for at least 10 years. And probably what we're aiming for is change forever. And together with IGG DGist, we've been working on this 10-year sustainability clause, and Brechtje Paardenkoper will come back to that. And what's very important that we continue to have this dialogue between different stakeholders, but also with different stakeholders, and particularly the local governments play a very important role. And I want to underline that we, as the WASH SDG consortium, I realize that we are only one player in the field, and we cannot realize this sustainability and system change by ourselves. But however, we are in the sphere of influence. We can inspire each other, and in order to embrace this sustainability clause, and we are ready to listen carefully to you. So please speak up today. And let's work on this sustainability together, because only through cooperation we can make it happen. So a big thank you for joining. Very much looking forward to this session, and keep in touch. Talk to you later. Thank you. Back to Esther.
Thanks, Ariette, and great that you could join us today for this session. Before we move on to hear from Brechtje, few housekeeping rules. I think Saskia will also share them, and they will not come to you as a surprise. I think in day 3 of the conference, we're all used to it by now. Mute and unmute yourself at the right time. If you want to contribute something, there should be a hand raising function. Otherwise, you can use the chat box in Pathable to raise any questions, mention a specific speaker if there's a question directed to one particular person or something you heard. And if there are technical problems, please get in touch with Brechtje Onk. She will be helping you, and you can reach her through the chat. We'll start with a plenary session that we're in now. In just a minute, we'll go to Brechtje Paardenkoper from the ministry to hear a bit more about sustainability clause, checks and compacts. We will then go into 4 breakout rooms to discuss some country experiences, but there's also a specific group who will work with the IRC to discuss more, or if you want to learn more about what the sustainability clause, checks and compacts are about. And then we'll come back into the plenary session for a short panel discussion, reflection on what you've discussed in the breakout groups before we close it in just under 90 minutes. So that's the frame of the session today. I would like to start with a short animation that explains a bit more about the program and the sustainability checks and compacts before we move on. So Saskia, please go ahead.
The WASH SDG program is a 5-year water, sanitation and hygiene initiative funded by the Dutch government, which operates in 7 countries: Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Nepal, Tanzania, Uganda and Zambia. It is led by Simavi and implemented by Plan International, SMV, and the WASH Alliance International. The program aims to drive progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals by supporting sustainable WASH services through different types of interventions and approaches. The program is anchored by a shared commitment to local solutions and collaboration, sustainability, equity, and the inclusion and empowerment of women and marginalized groups. It includes partnerships with many local NGOs, community organizations, and local governments in over 50 rural, urban, and peri-urban locations. So far, it has reached over 2 million people, improving access and use of water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities in households, healthcare facilities, and schools. The program continues to the end of 2022 and is part of the Dutch government's significant push towards the 2030 global goals across water, sanitation, hygiene, human rights, and the environment. There is a strong focus on providing sustainable WASH services and improving systems, so they don't break or become obsolete and can be maintained and used by those that need them until better services or alternatives are put in place. The drive towards sustainability includes working with local and national governments and other stakeholders on roles and responsibilities, both during and after the program activities. A sustainability clause, check and compact, have been included in the program to ensure that focus and attention is placed on long-term sustainability. It works by bringing together program partners and stakeholders around an agreement to maintain facilities and services and work together to overcome sustainability challenges. It has grown out of a focus on a wide range of sustainability issues, be they technical, financial, social, environmental, or institutional, and includes a commitment for up to 10 years after the formal end of program. All parties have their role to play. The clause is part of the grant agreement with the donor, and the compact and check mechanism has now been applied across 15 sub-programs. The process involves regular monitoring through the earlier mentioned checks, which investigates challenges to long-term sustainability, and a response and commitment from partners, which is documented and discussed. Today, we will be looking at the progress of the check and compact in a number of case studies, and discuss the ways in which the process has opened up a space for discussing and working on the many challenges that impact partners, governments, and users. We hope that by doing so, we will be able to better understand relationships and responsibilities between funders, implementers, and government institutions when looking at long-term sustainability.
Thank you, Saskia and your team. I think that's a really nice animation and introduction to what this session today is about. Without further ado, I think it's just the right time that we hear from Brechtje Paardenkoper. She works with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a senior policy advisor on water, has done so for the last so many years, and she can tell us a bit more about their commitments and their commitment also to discussing sustainability and sustainable wash services and system. Brechtje, please join us, and I think you've got a few slides that you will talk us through.
Yes, that's correct. Saskia, can I have the slides, please? And in the meantime, I'll already start, oh, there it is, start talking. Thank you very much, Esther. I have only a few slides because I'm going to talk about only a few issues, which is, first of all, why did we start to work on sustainability? How did we start to work on it? And what are the first preliminary results? So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, why we started to work on sustainability? Well, about 10 years ago, there was an evaluation being done of our whole wash portfolio, so the whole DGIS wash portfolio. And the results were quite positive, but there was one big criticism, and that is that the results of our projects and programs did not last. They were not sustainable, and that we should pay more attention to strengthening the system. And we knew that we were not the only donor dealing with this because, for example, 30 to 50% of rural water points in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, we know, fail within 5 years after construction. So wash systems frequently underperform due to systemic failures. So there is a larger reason to deal with this. Can you have the next slide, please? So what did we do? We started to work on what we call the 3 C's, and that's a clause, a check, and a compact. And we have been working on this one with UNICEF, who is working on a sector level, but also with all our implementing partners who also work on district and or city level. So today we're going to discuss the latter. First of all, the sustainability clause. That is a clause in contract, I think you all know, stating that implementing organizations commit themselves to deliver wash services that function well for at least 10 years after completion of the project funding. So that implies, of course, working on the system as well. Next slide, please. Secondly, we have the compact, because as many of you might be aware, at the beginning of the project, a thorough assessment of the whole wash system is being made in the inception report. And then based on that analysis, a compact is drawn up containing mutual agreements on gaps which need to be filled and roles and responsibilities of our partner. Well, that's in this case, the WASH SDG Consortium and local and central governments and other stakeholders. So that's about compact. Then third, we have the sustainability checks, which many of you also already know. They are independent checks carried out actually every 2 years on the performance of the wash surfaces, but also on the strength of the system. So the check is then followed by a management response stating how and why the possible gaps and by whom they will be addressed. Next slide, please. So how is it working out? And we found out that the sustainability clause in itself eventually turned out not to be feasible under Dutch law. So we are now investigating alternatives for it. But the first preliminary results of our evaluations and reviews show that there becomes a feedback loop on system strength and flexibility being shared between local authorities and stakeholders. So you have a check, you have action points, and in a compact or a management response, you have a check again. So if everything goes well, you can have a continuing feedback loop on the strength of the system and a continuing dialogue, which is very important. And the approach does seem to lead to more attention for systemic issues, which in turn lead to more sustainable results. That evaluation is still going to be done, but we think it will lead to more sustainable results. And how to go further, just a little thing about the session that we had on last Monday, is that we are going to have 4 pilot countries under the lead of UNICEF talking about sustainability on a sector level, and also working with I would say a think and do tank on how to work further on sustainability. So the results of this session will be very important also in how we are going to work in those 4 countries. So I'm very much looking forward to hear from you, also to hear from the field. And I hope you will also enjoy this session very much. Thank you very much. And back to Esther, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Brechtje. I hope that's made it clear to people what we're talking about today. I think it's also a nice bridge to discussing some of the specific country level experiences with these checks and compacts. I look forward to discussing more with you, Brechtje, as well, to see if there are specific countries that you'll work with UNICEF that we can link up with. Otherwise, I think the broader experiences would anyhow be relevant, but we'll pick up on that. Saskia, if you can please put up a slide, because we're going to go into breakout rooms, and each participant can choose which room you'd like to be in. Working backwards, I'll start with room 4, which is facilitated by Richard from the IRC. If you want to just learn more or discuss more around what sustainability clause checks and compacts are about, and how the tools are applied or can be used. So that's more of a general discussion around the use of the toolbox, so to say. Room 1, 2, and 3 will be going into country level discussions and sharing experiences. Room 1 will have experiences from Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and Nepal, which will be facilitated by Unia, actually from Wasnet. I think that's Uganda, which is not on this list, but happy to bring that in anyway, and Jose from Amref. Room 2, you can choose, which is discussing experiences from Indonesia. There should be, I should say, at least a Bahasa translation possible there. So it will be in English, but we can exchange experiences for those that only speak Bahasa or the other way around. And group 3 will be discussing experiences from Zambia and Nepal, and will be facilitated by Rajiv and Sharon from SMV. So those are your 4 options. It should appear in your window that you can choose the room that has your interest or where you feel you have most to contribute. You can choose the breakout room. So room 1 is around Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Nepal. Room 2 will discuss Indonesia. Room 3, Zambia and Nepal with our colleagues from SMV. And room 4 is to talk to Richard from the IRC about the sustainability checks and compacts. So please join one room that has your interests. Otherwise, Brechtje Onk can also direct you to a room, or if you have any technical issues, you can also ask her for support. I look forward to seeing you back in about 45 minutes. Too little time, I understand, but that's good to hear. I'm absolutely blown away by the commitment and energy that everybody's portraying, knowing that some of you are actually well into midnight on the Indonesia side and still having full-fledged sessions and discussions ongoing. Others from Nepal and Bangladesh are not far behind. It's very late in the evening, so we really appreciate that you're still with us. Thank you so much for that. We're going to have a brief panel discussion with representatives of the different groups. I'm looking forward to hear some of their takeaways. But feel free, if you have any takeaways or any remaining questions, you can put it in the chat box on Pathable, and we can still ask the panelists to respond to that or come back to you for your experience. So I would like to invite Julia, Rajiv, Sylvia, and Richard to be with us in camera and unmute, so we have you ready to speak. Yeah, maybe I'll just do a quick round amongst the four of you for a quick recap or reflection on what the main takeaways were from the discussion. And I will start with Unia and then I'll go to Sylvia. So Unia, if I can please ask you to go first.
Okay, thank you, Esther. From our case studies, from our speakers from Bangladesh and it was quite clear that sustainable compacts have enabled them to bring together key stakeholders to enhance on coordination and involvement. The key stakeholders that include government, civil society organizations, communities, to develop long-term plans, though currently the phase of financing these plans, but at least they know what needs to be in place in order to have a resilient wash systems. So that is a key takeaway from our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Unia. I'm sure we'll come back to you. I will then go to Sylvia before I will invite Rajiv. Sylvia, I understood that you were able to discuss with a representative from 3 different local governments. I know it's very late, but I see there's been very rich discussions. And you also came up with some recommendations. So can you tell us a bit more about what you discussed?
Yes, thank you. It has been a very fruitful discussion in our group, even though it is very early in the morning for some of us. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning in Lombok and Belu time. We have some discussion with 3 different districts, 2 areas from Plan, and then 1 area from SNV as a WASH SDG consortium. And we have also come up with 2 recommendations. One is the government prefer a 10-year sustainability compact signed a contract rather than 15 years, because as you know, for plan areas, we have to sign the agreement for 15 years, and some government think it is too long, especially if you think about some mutation of the government official. You know, they move around to different position every 2 years. And then you also know there is a long-term planning, development planning, that it's happening every 5 years. So it is more ideal to do the sustainability compact for 10 years rather than 15 years. That's the first recommendation. The second recommendation is some government find that the format of the sustainability clause is too long. They would rather make it as simple as possible. For example, a step-by-step guidance, you know, and then what to do next. For example, in 2 years, this is the parameters, you should achieve this. This is the indicators of your achievement. And then in the next 2 years, this is what you should achieve. This is the step-by-step you should do to verify ODF, to verify 5 pillars of SDGM, for example, in Indonesia case. So the recommendation, the second recommendation, is to make the sustainability clause format as simple as possible, because some government find that it is quite complicated. What is the format it is now? So they would rather make it more simple and then easy to use and step-by-step practical guidance. I think that's it from my side. Too big homework to do, but I hope we can do and achieve and also improve the sustainability compact and clause within the next 2 years after this event. Hopefully before the end of the WASH SDG, we'll be able to improve that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think there's some very concrete and helpful recommendations that I trust might resonate with some of the other country experts. And I'm also looking forward to hearing how it aligns maybe with some of the existing monitoring systems in different countries. So I'll first go to Rajiv to hear from him about his group, and then I would like to hear from Richard, who had a slightly different type of discussion, but interested to hear your takeaways as well. But first, Rajiv, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in our group also, when The discussion was very fruitful and it was very lively, though the time was very limited. But one takeaway was like most of the local authorities, they do sign MOU for different programs with different development partners and others. But when they saw this sustainability clause, it was a unique clause in terms, it was not a regular MOU where donor is requesting or asking for reporting post the program. So, I mean, it kind of held them to think through, like, okay, in this case, like, how do we, what does this mean to us? So in all the program, we started with sustainability compact analysis in terms of seeing how is the monitoring system and how we can, are we able to report it? If able to report it, what type of data are already being collected? What needs to be done? So this exercise was done before the signing of the MOU. Like in different countries like Zambia and Nepal. In Zambia, even we had to go through Ministry of Justice in order to get their approval so that there is no additional liability. And the context was also different in Nepal, since they were, Nepal was going through all the new institutional settings. The ministry, they were shifting ministry every 6 months. So it was not clear how the reporting line would be and all. But as far as commitment for the ensuring the services, all the local authorities are committed. But the challenge was like, I mean, they see was like how to ensure the operationalization of the sustainability clause. So what does this mean to local authority when we have to report to DGIA's post program, how this would be operationalized? That's one part. But on the other side, like local authority were also kind of thought that, okay, if the donor is asking for post reporting, that's also a commitment from the donor to support for longer period. So they are not here to just a kind of like fix the solution and move, but more for a long-term approach in order to support. So the partners are also expecting that there will be a long-term support in order to strengthen the system as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. Very useful insights. Richard, you had a slightly different discussion in your group and a much smaller group, I believe, but it could sometimes lead to more in-depth discussions than being with a huge gathering. What were your takeaways or what were your discussions about? Please go ahead.
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, we had the opportunity to sort of step back and reflect on where the clause check and compact has come from. From a single check that took place in Mozambique in 2008, it's grown to be undertaken across many countries by many different partners with slightly varying approaches. But we're seeing an effective degree of standardization and adaptation and acceptance across the sector. And we're also able to see that it is very useful as a platform to broach topics that otherwise wouldn't be discussed if you were only focusing on, say, programmatic monitoring, or if you were only looking at very broad, high-level topics. So really one of our takeaways was we were able to see that the check has kind of a unique place where it sits between like tight focus monitoring and very high level. It bridges the two, and it allows discussions to take place between partners that can, I think, open a space for further action. And our takeaway was more, I mean, we started looking into the past, but our takeaway, we ended up looking into the future to think about, like, when is the best time to undertake the check? Should we move towards the beginning of programs? How often should it take place? And then how should we ensure that there's commitment after programs to essentially go back and ensure sustainability in areas where programs have been operating in the past. So we were looking forward towards kind of continuity. And I think that's a question for everyone to consider over the last couple of years of this program as to how things move forward next. And it's been very encouraging for us to see these approaches come together.
Thanks, Richard. But today it's just a short session to discuss some of these experiences. I know you and IRC, together with all the other partners, are involved in the program, and there's a lot more learning and exchange happening as we speak. The first sustainability checks were done in recent months, so there's definitely going to be a follow-up, as there is with the ministry, and I'll come back to Brechtje before we close this meeting, with her famous wise words to finish off in the end. But maybe to reflect on some of the additional questions that came in through the chat box. Earlier on, there was a question from Ranjan around the finalization of these sustainability checks, looking at WASH services, but also looking at the lifetime of WASH infrastructure and how that's taken into account, given the timeframes that we're looking at. Unia, is that something that you could reflect on and discussions you've had in Uganda, for example?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, there was a question around the lifetime of WASH infrastructure and how that's linked to the sustainability clause, which goes sometimes beyond that lifetime. And we're looking at services and not only infrastructure, and how you've dealt with that or how that has come up in your discussions in Uganda.
Well, if I refer to the because we are not directly involved in there, but at least we try to pick up comes from the program on that was done, I think, in 2019. It really stipulates, the good thing stipulates where the gaps are and responsible to make sure that these gaps are addressed. So in a way, because even the sustainability is done in partnership, government and the community, some community representatives, and also the NGOs. So a commitment, and there's identification of to be done, what needs to be in place, Beatrice. But what I liked the report is that you see that there's acknowledgement that some of them and they can be addressed by the different stakeholders. Others are long term. So strategies are there are more long-term discussions between different stakeholders to ensure that they are addressed. But one key element about the sustainable impact process, the fact that it brings forward and emphasizes the involvement of communities, because they have a role of maintaining these, and also they are also committed. They are vowed to commit to make sure that they manage these assets well. So the fact that from planning, implementation, and monitoring, irrespective of the different donors or the government of, this came out actually from Nepal, where you find that some government officials, you know, the compact agreement is for 10 or 15 years. They're in maybe 5 or 10 years beyond what the commitment calls for. Because there are other institutions that have been built to ensure that sustainability, to ensure that they aim and they commit to sustaining this service. So there's hope that the objective will be. Thank you.
Thanks, Unia. I think there's hope with everybody. That's what we're all working towards. Looking at time, I think there's one question I would like to highlight from the chat box, and maybe Rajiv, you can shine a light on this. And it was around the budget, because none of this just comes for nothing, and sustainability comes at a cost, and so do the sustainability checks and the clause. And how is this in this program in relation or in ratio to kind of implementation cost, and maybe also you can say something about the cost being borne by the project versus maybe what local authorities themselves can contribute to it and building it into their monitoring systems.
Yeah, thank you. I think, as I said earlier, when the clause came in, we looked into the monitoring system, whatever is already available, and what national government are planning to compile from different cities. So if all the data are complete from that system, then I mean, it's already kind of mainstream within the national system. But if we want an additional indicators, then yeah, definitely there are costs for collecting those. But in terms of working for sustainable services, I mean, sometimes cost is not the issue. Yeah, cost does matter, but yeah, I mean, there are small things which which the municipality or the certain partners can work in. Like, I mean, when we were doing the sustainability checks, one of our observation is like, when you are marking, it's a little bit binary. Like, I mean, if you take one of the sustainability principle, there's only yes and no. But in between, I mean, we are doing lots of work and it gets lost if we say only yes and no. So there are these middle areas where the municipalities have been focusing on in order to address that sustainability principle. Just another point regarding
Can you keep it short,
Ranjan's,
Rajiv, because we are about to run out of time. So one short last comment.
Just on Ranjan's part in the life cycle cost, we are focusing more from the sustainable services rather than the infrastructure part. So, and when we focus on the services, yeah, when the infrastructure selection, we perform the informed choice process where the technological cost, everything are already inbuilt. And for SNV, since we are working on urban sanitation, the infrastructure involvement is investment from the project is very less, but we are trying to leverage the fund for infrastructure. I hope I answered, Ranjan. Thank you.
Thanks, very good points, Rajiv. Thank you, and Unia, Sylvia, and Richard, and everybody who's really put in a lot of time and effort into organizing this. Thank you so much. I would like to finish by asking Brechtje Paardenkoper for kind of your main takeaways, having joined one of the groups and having been part of many of these discussions over the last few years. Brechtje, go ahead.
Yes, and thank you very much. And I enjoyed it very much, also the discussion in the groups. I'm not going to repeat what Rajiv said because it was already very, very thoughtful. There are a few recommendations that I'm going to take with me, the 10-year and the 15-year time, also the format of the compacts. But what I do take with me is that it definitely helps to improve accountability and strengthen transparency, and also coordination with all groups, and also the leadership position of the local government in the platforms where the plans for improving the system, strengthening the system, and the long-term plans are being discussed with all stakeholders. And I think that was the main aim of the whole exercise. So that's something that we are going to take with us. And thank you very much for the discussion.
Well, thank you, Brechtje, for joining us. It's been very valuable to have you on board today. Once again, I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. We will continue the discussion in the countries with the authorities, of course, also with the ministry as our main funder for this program. A special thank you once again to those of you who should have been in bed a long time ago. Go rest well. Thank you so much for your valuable contributions and your commitment, and look forward to catching many of you in other sessions in the days to come. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.